Let us welcome to the show from Alternative Jewish Voices. It's Marilyn Garson. Marilyn, good evening and welcome back.
Good evening. Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, we haven't seen you for a while. The last time we talked to you, was it when you were releasing your book? How long ago was that?
That was the end of October. And this week, the UK edition is being released. So it's kind of a good anniversary to say hello. Oh, and look who's going to say hello. Yeah.
We are an animal-friendly show. There is no problems with that. Very cool. So being released in the UK, any word, like any media over there sniffing around looking for interviews, doing anything like that with the UK press?
Yes, we have our first launch event on Saturday night, which is early Sunday morning here with Jewish Voice for Labor. That's a really obvious channel after what happened with Jeremy Corbyn.
Very cool. All right, let's get into this conversation now. We've got a few things that we may want to talk about during this conversation, but let's start with this news today. Now, I'm just going to turn the volume down. Whānau here will know that I'm quite conscientious of making sure as much as humanly possible, we don't spread dis or misinformation with footage. Even last night when we were talking about the lawyer from Cambridge, we didn't say his name, even though his name was out there. Now his name has been publicized. That's a different story. And last night we were like, we're not quite sure when the video was from. We think it's this weekend. So what I'm going to say is we think that they have footage here of this guy being beaten. Now, I haven't seen confirmation of this, but with news sources showing it now, it's probably pretty fair to assume, although it is still an assumption, that this is accurate information. His name is Hamdan Ballal. As we said, he is an Oscar award-winning documentary filmmaker, No Other Land. And I'll play this in the background. This allegedly is footage of him being taken by IDF soldiers today. Marilyn, we said we're going to talk about this today. Do you have any information to pass on or any thoughts around what we're seeing?
I have looked for updates and I have not found them. So as far as I know, nothing further is known about this man. He's just disappeared into official Israel. And I wanted to speak to two dimensions of what I observe. I'm not sure if they are self-explanatory. I think they're worth pulling out. The first thing that strikes me is that when these kinds of assaults happen, the settlers don't seem to mind being filmed. Okay, there's one person there with a bag over his head, but normally there's video and no one has too much concern about being filmed. And I think that says something that we need to pay attention to. I think the fact that it happens speaks to really the rot in every institution that is intended to socialize young people. Family, education systems, the police, the military, the government. But there is a different rhythm to the violence that happens in Palestine. I don't know the West Bank well, but I became aware of it in the nights of the bombardments in Gaza. The strange thing is, Gaza has no defensive weapons. So wherever you are, you just sit and wait for the next bomb. You just sit, you listen to the planes circling and circling and circling, boom, because there is no other response. That means that the people who are perpetrating the violence, they can take all the time in the world. They have the numbers, they have the weapons, and they have nothing to fear.
Hey, Marilyn, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but can I just make clear to our audience, you're speaking from experience here. You were there in 2011, is that right? And so this is not the stories that you're told. You've experienced this, correct?
Right. I was in Gaza from 2011 through 2015. So the whole period of the 2014 bombardment, I was there. And what struck me is how safe Israelis are in the process of committing violence or war crimes, whatever it is they're doing, there is no fear to humble them. And there is nothing to spark any empathy with the people that they are terrorizing. It's an unhealthy kind of fearlessness. And that's what I see in these vicious settlers. They know that they're going to walk away from their violence and from the destruction of people's homes with the approval of their government because they are implementing a state project.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hard for us to get to grips with the extent of the unprotectedness that is Palestinian life.
It's interesting because I think about, you see IDF soldiers on social medias and stuff celebrating or getting engaged in and amongst rubble. They're doing that as well. And it's funny when you think about it. There is a church in New Zealand who did something recently, allegedly, at a Te Aratū library. Obviously not to the same scale, but the difference is amongst their church, they celebrated it. We showed some footage on here of the church service the next day. They celebrated it and they slapped each other's backs. But the difference is then you take one step outside their church and they have a community around them which says, hell no. I guess what you're saying is the community around these people are also going, yes. And then the community outside them are going, yes. And then their government is going, yes. So there's no one to go, hell no, to the settlers.
Exactly. And it apparently was a group of soldiers who pulled this man out of an ambulance. Where is the safety? It's almost beyond imagining. And that, it keeps happening, right? We have this man, Hamdan Ballal. We have Dr. Hussam Abu Safia out of a hospital. He walked into custody and just disappeared. It's going to keep happening because there is no moderating mechanism within Israel. This is ours to end. These are statements of urgency. Every time these things are broadcasted, we end this. That's what I saw. I saw a call to action.
Can we also just, and you're far more knowledgeable than us on this, I mean, we can read pages, but you know people there. We hear about the hostages that Hamas have. Hostages should be returned. Hostages should be returned immediately. We can have that conversation and we can still ask the question, how many people without trial are sitting in Israeli prisons who are Palestinian? We don't hear that part of the conversation very much. Are you able to shed some light on that?
A really important place to look is DCI, Defense for Children International, because Israel is, I believe, the only country on this planet that routinely imprisons children in military jails. So in Gaza, it was such a part of life. Families had people taken and they heard nothing and they had no access. They had no way to protest beyond going to the Red Cross office. Mm-hmm. You want to call that imprisonment? I call that abduction. I call that holding people without any kind of justice or due process. And that's a fact of Palestinian life. When I hear that, I think, if someone took a member of my family, what wouldn't I do? And that is Palestinian reality.
Yeah. Yeah. Chewie.
Yeah, I've seen lots of footage over the last year of Israeli settler behavior in the West Bank specifically. And there's certainly great documentaries or reporters' pieces about how restrictive life is for the people that live on the West Bank. And I think, there was a comment going, oh, well, maybe this is Palestinians setting up some sort of false flag thing to get attention. They don't have to do that. The Israelis aren't hiding their actions. It happens in full view of cameras, in broad daylight. They will move into people's houses when they are out, and they know that they have the full support of the IDF if someone makes a complaint. So why would they feel the need? This is why they don't hide their faces. This is why it happens in broad daylight, because there is zero consequences for whatever actions that they have. And it goes right up to murder. So, you know, they for this director, I almost feel, and it's way too early to tell this for sure, but I feel like this is targeted. For him to draw that level of attention to what is happening on the West Bank, that there would be repercussions for it. And I think it's quite telling that people are using a term from a different culture to describe what happened to him, a lynching. Because that certainly is what happened in the United States when their black population got out of line, that forgot their station in their society and pushed back. So I think that's quite telling that that language is being used in this circumstance.
I agree. And I would say it goes beyond murder. It goes up to statements of genocidal intent, right? There is no hesitation to say these things anymore. Why is there no hesitation to say or do these things anytime a person is noticed in the act of resistance? Because we are doing nothing. We being the world, but in our case, the Aotearoa government doing nothing. The International Court of Justice has instructed us to act, not to let this seem normal. What are we doing? Nothing. We say a few words now and then, but those are eclipsed by the words that, for example, Winston Peters says on his way to the US, oh, let's imitate some American policies and then ask them what they need from us. That's where impunity flourishes.
Obviously, I'm not drawing a parallel here, but we're talking about people who do things with impunity, and in a very, 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 very minor way compared to what we're talking about. In the weekend just gone here, there was a Waikato lawyer filmed yelling at pro-Palestinian protesters. This is on the Herald right now. The Herald has named them pro-Palestinian protesters being yelled at by Waikato lawyer Paul Fisher. We saw this last night, so I won't play it. We'll have a few seconds of it though. Anti-Semite! 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 Come on! Are you going to do what you did to them on the 7th of October? Are you going to do what you did to them on the 7th of October, like these pro-Palestinian protesters committed some kind of offence? This has now gone much more viral. And as I said, mainstream media have located him. We thought we had the name last night and it wasn't confirmed, so we didn't do it, but it's out there now. The group that were doing it were a part of the Palestinian Solidarity Network Aotearoa. Its chairman, activist John Minto, said he had sent Fisher an email requesting to meet to have an informal discussion about Israel-Palestine conflict. It's clear he's got the wrong end of the stick somewhere. This is Minto said to NZME. He believes Mr. Fisher is someone who is just blind to what Israel is doing in the most appalling way. What are your thoughts, Marilyn, when you see this kind of, can't even call it a counter protest, this verbal assault happening to some protesters in Cambridge?
Yeah, the first thing I did was to send out some emails to people to say, do you know this man? Do we know anyone who might talk him down? Because he struck me as being so utterly out of control. And it's way beyond, the word that comes to mind is fragile, but it's way beyond that. 62,000 people are dead. This man cannot bear the sight of a flag being held by a peaceful person. It's like he's entitled to just spit his latte. It's a way of demanding total silence. And it seems to me that we are in a new era of this silencing. There's something performative. I don't think he's misinformed. I think there's a performance going on here. Since Israel broke the ceasefire on March 19th, I feel like people are trying to set a new stage. There's something ahistoric about declaring this to be the new normal. You know, on October 7th, Israel's advocates tried to pretend that the previous 75 years hadn't happened. This is the start of history. I feel like they're trying to do it again now, so that this new round is now the normal. Israel can do anything. They can slaughter 400 civilians. They can bomb people in their tents in one night. They can assassinate more journalists, more aid workers, and that's now normal. And the slightest protest, that will evoke this whole body response. But this is not the new normal. And I don't think there is a reasonable conversation to be had with that man. Look at him. He is trying to demand silence. I feel like there is an assault on memory here that says we're supposed to forget what has gone before and just be quiet. And it fills me with the urge to dig in my heels and sort of hold on to a baseline, right? The baseline is that Palestinians have as much right as I have to sleep safely at night, to have food and shelter. That's normal. What's going on now is not normal, and it must not be silenced.
It's fascinating as well, because you're seeing it today in the Paul Fisher situation, that a sector of the a sector of Jewish voices, more conservative ones, are now rallying around, posting things on their Twitter feeds like, look at this Twitter post where 40,000 people support this man. And I'm like, we had an interaction yesterday with Juliet. Well, I had personally with Juliet Moses, and it's almost like, it feels like deep down they know they're in the wrong. Like if that was my spokesperson, I'd be like, oh, look, you know, yes, we're on the same team, but what he did was inappropriate and wrong. They don't seem to be able to do that, because if they take an inch backwards, they think they've lost. Maybe it is exactly like what's happening over in Israel. They always have to move forward no matter what. And yesterday it came down to a conversation online where the simple question was, do you think that war crimes are being committed by Israel in this current conflict? And that question would not get answered, even though this person came onto my Twitter feed and started kind of moving forward. But then once that question came out, the response was, you're not worth my time. I've got work to do. You know, so all of a sudden, it was like they weren't going to work backwards. So I guess the very best they can do is stand. And I don't understand that, because apart from anything else, it's a really bad tactic to win anything, let alone a war. But any kind of conversation, whether it's the hearts and souls or whether it's, you know, the political campaign, to only move forward, eventually someone's going to, metaphorically speaking, donk you in the nose if you keep walking towards them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think something else is going on, or something additional is going on. I think there's a reason why they can't walk back. In general, these issues, Israel's actions, war crimes, Palestinian rights, you can tackle these issues either through universals or through absolutes. Human rights are a universal. It's a set of values that must apply to everyone, and it has a moderating effect because it imagines a coexistence. Absolutes, like some identity politics, they can't compromise. They think you are what you are by virtue of who you are, and they do not, in fact, imagine a coexistence. Israel's advocates in this country have staked so much on creating a single assembly. Jewish equals Israel. Jewish equals victimhood. It's become an absolute kind of identity politics, and they need to attack any other source of Jewish identity, let alone any challenge to their construct. So when you say is Israel committing war crimes? They can't compromise because you're saying, is your entire construct guilty and bad? These people, they got into bed as immaculate victims, and they have woken up on the wrong side of genocide. They can't find the door. So as far as I'm concerned, fuck them. They have failed the ethical test of our lifetime. We need new institutions. These ones are broken.
Yeah. And about as far as, this person got yesterday with me was, well, of course, if Israel commits war crimes, I will denounce it. Yeah, but hang on. Are they? Not did they or would they? Are they? And it's the are they couldn't answer. Chewie.
Yes. There was talk of another war crime in Gaza today. I believe the last Gazan journalist was killed this week. That his vehicle was targeted. And looping back to what you said, Marilyn, Gaza has no air defense. So, look, if they were really serious about limiting collateral damage and not targeting UN aid workers and journalists and that sort of thing, they could circle Gaza until the right person walked out of the right door and then zap them. The fact that they're making all of these mistakes and have been making these mistakes since day one speaks to their true objectives here. So, yeah, like, how can you sit there and try and say, oh, no, like, oh, if they do a war crime, I'll absolutely denounce it. And that's why I've said absolutely nothing for almost 2 years. Haven't seen one yet. They've never done one.
Has anyone ever said if Hamas committed crimes on October 7th?
It's a very good point.
And how many journalists in this country have said boo about the slaughter of journalists in Palestine? What was the statistic? Israel was responsible for 75%, it's not the accurate number, of journalists killed all year on Earth last year. How can it be? You can't have it both ways. You can't have the high ground and the bloodthirsty playing to your constituency. You just can't. We've got to call this out.
I was just looking, obviously, I'm sure you guys have seen it. There's photos and videos all over the internet at the moment of the journalist from Gaza. I should have saved it. I didn't. But on my TikTok feed today, I came across, I think he's been missing once before. And he came back into the area and he was in a truck or a van and he had his elbow on the window and there was a girl talking to him through the window going, I thank God you're okay. When I grow up, I want to be a journalist. But it was him, obviously previously. And then, of course, the juxtaposition of seeing people around his body today is quite shocking. And as you guys are both saying, this is not an uncommon occurrence, which I think is the scariest thing of all.
I saw footage today of his mother approaching the grave. Just think of it. Just imagine the families, the children, the parents who have known that a member of their family is putting their life on the line to tell this story. How can that not be worth speaking to in our own media? How can that go by?
I think, Pat, when you talk about journalists and that sort of thing, one of the things that I have been incredibly disappointed with out of all of New Zealand's news outlets is how Radio New Zealand continues to use really passive language when it comes to what's happening in Gaza. Hamas has hostages, Israel has prisoners, which implies courts and a fair judiciary and all of that sort of thing, that UN workers and journalists are being killed, allegedly wrong place, wrong time. They're taking a very passive stance to anything that Hamas says. Anything that comes out of is of course from a Hamas source. Hamas sources say all of this sort of thing, where they don't do the same thing for Israel. And the more I notice it, the more it's there. I don't think our media have been doing a very good job at this at all. And when one of the aspects for putting pressure on politicians to do the right thing is our media, then they're failing us here as well.
Absolutely. The structure of the story, Israel says this, assumption of trustworthiness. New Zealand voice affirms, because, man, we've got apologists here. They are Netanyahu's second-day story no matter what he does. They don't say Netanyahu, who is internationally wanted for crimes of genocide, claims. They don't say that. Then they say the Hamas-led ministry claims, and where's the Palestinian voice? It's just so overt. I know that they've done their own investigation and found that they upheld their own policies. Well, I think we need to look at their policies, if so. There's no question. Why does our government do nothing? Because they believe they can get away with it. If you ask politicians, they will say, okay, here's the crowd in the street. No one else cares. You know what I do when I really need to be uplifted? I drive up the coast to, there are flag wavings. Just choose a flag waving. Go and wave a flag. Be among people who are far from the headlines, but they persevere week after week to say, we care, we find it intolerable, and here we are. That's what's going to make this change all over the world, times a billion. That's what we need. It has to
what, Marilyn?
For politicians to ignore.
Yeah. I think that's where we'll leave it for tonight. I think they're good words to go out on as to what we need and what we want to move. That's okay. Unless there's anything else that you two really want to wrap up with, but I think that's quite a nice spot to go out as to how we move forward. All good?
I agree.
Okay. Before we go, Marilyn, we'll just tell people again, I know this is not why you're here, but we'll still tell people about your book. Still available, easy to pick up, Jewish, Not Zionist. And if people want to find out more about alternative Jewish voices, it's ajv.org.nz. Hey, thanks so much for joining in again tonight, and we will have you on again super soon.
Thank you for keeping this visible and present. We all appreciate that very much.